You're listening to Dodge Movie Podcast. Your hosts are Christy and Mike Dodge, the founders of Dodge Media Productions. We produce films and podcasts, so this is a podcast about films. Join them as they share their passion for filmmaking.
Welcome back, everybody, to this final week of our month of Kevin Smith films. Today we are going to be talking about the film Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. And it is the most recent Kevin Smith film set in 2019. And it comes after a heart attack that he had the previous year in 2018. And he said, as he lay on the table, he realized that he was okay with leaving this planet. He only had one regret, that he did not do another Jay and Silent Bob movie. So he got the gang back together and they filmed this movie, written and directed by Kevin Smith, starring all the old crew: Joey Lauren Adams, Ben Affleck. A new sighting is Fred Armisen, Dietrich Bader, another newbie, Melissa Benoist, Jason Biggs, Adam Brody, all the people from Clerks, and all of the comic book men, and many, many, many others. It's a Smodcast Pictures View Askew, and Saban Films released it theatrically, and Lionsgate distributed the DVDs and the Blu-rays. The synopsis for this film is Jay and Silent Bob inadvertently sign away their names and the rights to a new Blunt Man and Chronic movie. Now they head to Hollywood to stop the film from being made. Along the way, Jay discovers that he is a father. And so, like we said before, this is now an older Kevin Smith, a Kevin Smith who is the father of a grown daughter. And you see in this film kind of that sweet affection that a father can have for a daughter. And so it's a far cry from the Mallrats days. So, Mike, why don't you kick us off and tell us what the pickup line is?
Oh, shit.
Did you forget?
No, that's actually the pickup line.
So still on brand for Kevin.
On brand for Kevin. Wanted everybody to know on the first line what they were in for.
Right. When is it? What is occurring when that happens?
I believe that the SWAT team has showed up at the Cock Smoker, the chicken roasting restaurant that serves as a front for Jay and Silent Bob's cannabis distribution.
Right. Once again, on brand, because...
Super on brand.
I can't remember what film it happened, but Kevin was a late-in-life pot smoker.
Mm-hmm. That does raise a question, spoiler alert here of a sort, but I want to know, when Jason Mewes drops his pants and he shows the world his lower regions, did some poor person in hair and makeup have to shave his pubic hair, or did he do that himself?
No, he had some. It was there.
Yeah, but it was shaved. So did somebody have to...
It was shaved.
It made a heart.
It did?
Yeah.
You were looking far closer than me.
Well, you're supposed to. I was helping out the filmmaker. That's what you're supposed to be looking for. I mean, Jay went to all that trouble. I thought it was only fair. So that's my question.
Maybe his lady did it for him.
Well, if not, hair and makeup earned extra pay that day.
Yes, they did. So this is a perfect opening shot for a Kevin Smith film. First of all, we're at the Quick Stop, which is where it all began, back in the movie Clerks, and having Jay and Silent Bob, who are a couple of stoners throughout every single movie, be, the proprietors of a weed store is just completely on brand.
Yeah. And the name of it is a naughty pun.
Yes. So classic. And then it continues because then they're marched into court where the judge's name is Jerry N. Executioner, played by Craig Robinson.
My production question is whether that was a courtroom or not. I thought it looked more like a church, how big it was and all the pews.
Oh, interesting. It was very dark, but I will notice that a lot of times they do use very dark rooms for courtrooms. And if you actually go into a courtroom, it's pretty bland. Like they're just like bigger office buildings.
It looks like a set for The Office.
Right, exactly. And then I enjoyed, as someone who listens to a lot of Kevin Smith podcasts, there's one he does with Jason Mewes shortly after Mewes went through rehab, I think after Clerks, either before or after Clerks 2. And there's a line in the theme song, and Justin Long speaks that line, and I recognized it from the theme song where he says, "Everyone say yay, it's Jay and Silent Bob." But he speaks it instead of sings it. But anyway, my ear went, oh, I know that. So I thought that was kind of cool. Very meta.
When I am mugging instead of saying anything, my kids will say that I'm silent bobbing.
Right.
Right. And I do try to embody that sometimes when someone else is speaking, and I want to kind of communicate a little bit, but I don't want to interrupt. And I think that this film is the most and best silent bobbing from Kevin Smith of all of his films.
Yeah, there was a little bit more miming and charades going on in this one.
Right. Yeah. I think if we look back at Clerks and Mallrats, we'll see that we got maybe some eyebrow raising kind of expressions. But here he's really taking it to a new level, I think, in terms of his silent bombing.
Yes. With the use of a cell phone.
Right. And that's a funny gag to me that he types on it 37 times just to show an emoji.
Right. He speaks through emojis, but yeah, pounds on the phone for...
It makes my finger hurt to hear that sound because it sounds like he is really hammering on that screen.
Right.
I do wonder if at some point in the future, 10 or 20 years from now, if industrial engineers will be like, why did you people use hard glass? That was stupid.
Yeah.
You break your fingers. I don't know what else we'd use, but they'll come up with something.
So then they end up at the secret stash, who it's now called Brody's secret stash, and they're back in the mall, and they're talking to Brody, who now, instead of the morphed t-shirt that we referenced in Mallrats, he's wearing a Stan Lee, and Stan passed just before this was made. I love that Kevin still has Stan in the movie in, a way that he could. And they're talking to Brody, and they're saying like, well, what's a reboot? Because this film is going to be made. And I love it when they break it down like, because Hollywood has no ideas. And so they just take a movie from when they were younger, and then when they all finish, they do the thing we talked about in Smokey and the Bandit. All three of them turn and look at the camera and kind of like shrug like, yep, this is a reboot.
And there's a couple of great lines in there. I effing hate Kevin Smith is one of them.
Yeah.
And then,
and he's standing, like, is it Jay that says that, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's who wants to watch Jay and Silent Bob anymore? Right. So this film has a lot of references, but also not just to other things in the View Askew universe, but references to itself.
Yeah.
So they do break the fourth wall visually, but they also do it a lot in terms of the commentary. As they go through the film, the audience knows they're watching a film and they're laughing. But that really, I think, comes to the peak, and it's really hilarious later on when there's a couple of lines where they're just talking about the humor based on the fact that this is a movie, including America's most precious resource, actors, which I thought was great. But my favorite, for obvious reasons, is movie people are dicks, especially directors. Right. I'm sure my casting crew would tell you that I have a very similar sense of humor. So when Kevin wrote that line, I like that. I like that kind of self-deprecating humor there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in a way this movie is such a... I do think that he kind of had a crisis of health and realized his mortality. And this was a thank you to all of those fans who have followed him and listened to his podcast and bought his merchandise and have gone to his movies and have supported him, because it was almost like he referenced his entire life. In fact, even things that happened outside of the movies. So Kevin Smith one time was unfortunately asked to get off of a Southwest flight, and he tweeted about it, and it was like hashtag too fat to fly. And there is a complete story arc with Molly Shannon where there's like, I guess, a misunderstanding because she says, oh, you're on like the wait list or something. And Jay goes, wait, are you saying he's too fat to fly?
Yeah, it's something like weight problem. And there's a sight gag as she shows in the monitor, and it's South Best Airlines instead of Southwest Airlines, who were the people who originally said he was too fat to fly.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. It is, in a sense, for those fans, the people who've been there all along, right? Some of these jokes as not only referring to the other movies, but like you said, to the stuff that happens around it in his own life.
Because I think if you are a Kevin Smith fan, you are following him on Twitter. It's more than just... like, they are loyal people. In fact, I think at the end, when they go to the Blunt Man and Chronic Comic-Con, and there's basically everyone who is in those scenes in the background are dressed up like Jay and Bob or Bluntman and Chronic. I think those are all fans that they just basically said, hey, show up dressed like one or the other on this day at this place. And I'm almost positive that I remember that those are all fans.
Okay, so now I need to have my fans all show up in an elevator somewhere. Flash mob the elevator.
No, jean shorts and a Aloha shirt.
There you go. In an elevator.
Right. Yeah, that's a little tricky to do. But I love like all the little nods. Like Jay on his hat, he has the Buddy Christ film from Dogma. He has that pin on his hat. And they go to Movies, which is, I guess, like Burger King knockoff, you'd call it, the fast food place. And that was in probably Jay and Silent Bob, right?
Clerks 2 as well.
Yeah. But when were we first introduced to Movies?
Yeah, not sure, but Jay and Silent Bob sounds right.
What about some of the either writing or cinematography that stood out for you?
I previously mentioned referring to other things that happen in the world outside of it, but I have to give a special commendation to when Jason Lee as Brody refers to the Squeakquel. Because we know he was in Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Oh,
right.
I missed that.
Probably my favorite pun, though, goes to Matt Damon as Loki, coming back from Dogma, when he says, that's my reborn identity.
And then
again,
laughs at himself.
Laughs at his own joke. Tip of the cap. You were on point that day, Damon. Good job. There's an interesting callback you talked about with Kevin willing Ben to be Batman at some point. I did think this is interesting to do the math here, because there's a line in there where they say that the weed was grown on a commune in Oregon where deaf people grow the best weed. And I'm wondering, was that what caused Jim Belushi to start growing weed in Oregon? Which came first, that line or the actual farm?
All things come back to Kevin Smith.
Right. So the first time I saw this film, I didn't catch this, but it is kind of an interesting point. His daughter, Kevin's real life daughter, plays, spoiler alert, Jay's daughter in the film, and she has a silent friend. Her friend is deaf and hard of hearing.
Oh my God, how did I not see that?
I know, I didn't catch it first either. And so she has her own silent Bob. So I thought that was kind of a cute thing for how that worked out. But we talk about how Kevin is really, truly a softie. And the midpoint of this film is this discussion between Jay and the character of Millie, for Millennium Falcon, Star Wars reference.
Right. And just as an aside, Kevin named his real life daughter Harley Quinn after a Marvel character. So like
Harley Quinn, right?
Yeah.
So my kid should be happy that I didn't name them weird things. It's just the dogs. But the midpoint is there's this heart-to-heart about missing dads, and there's this heartbreaking line, why didn't he love me enough to stick around? And that was, to me, that's the obvious midpoint of the film, but that is kind of the crux. That's what Kevin's talking about, right? And in a sense, I might get Terry talking about this. He stuck around to make this film.
Oh, you're so sweet. Yeah. No, this definitely shook him, as probably most heart attacks do to people who
yeah, you would
suffer
think.
from them. And I think I've seen from him, instead of just almost like a passivity. I mean, he's always been a maker and a doer and an earner, but I think he's definitely much more intentional now with what he does. Like, he's not doing the road shows as much. He truly is just kind of doing what he wants to do.
Well, I think that, if you have enough money where your physical needs are taken care of, that's probably a decent way to go about it. Again, people probably lying on their deathbed, or in his case, maybe the death surgical table. You think about what's important. And so he had that chance, right, to come back and do some of this stuff. But you also see kind of his love, I think, for cinema in there, because not only do we have the ubiquitous Star Wars references, but he brings in the Alec Baldwin monologue from Glengarry Glen Ross, right? The good news is you're fired, and always be, not closing in this case. And he's making fun of the KKK. Which, again, a reasonable thing to do. I'm not sure if there was something in particular that caused him to really want to bring that topic up at this time. I don't know the connection of that.
Well, he's always kind of taken on like those hate groups, because
right.
What movie was it? But when he took on Westboro Baptist, and then Red State is kind of dealing with kind of your evangelical Christians. So
It was just on the list and he hadn't got to them yet, I guess.
Yeah, let's say that.
Right. But what I liked about that is I don't know if there's a lot of people who were upset about that. Maybe for a person who can be somewhat controversial in his humor, that one seems pretty safe. I mean, there's probably some people who are upset, but not a lot of them.
Yeah, but he doesn't paint them in a great light. It's not like he's glorifying them.
Oh, no,
in fact,
no.
he literally shits on them.
Yes, he does. But I just more meant, we were talking a little bit about Chasing Amy, where maybe some of the characters' opinions were a little bit more controversial. In this case, I think that's probably well received by most of his audience.
Right. Yeah, because I did not see this movie, but in Yoga Hosers, he takes on, the Nazis.
Again, you can always make fun of Nazis.
Right. So I think, he definitely puts his stake in trying to come out on the right side of things. Lately, I guess I should say.
Correct. Another thing that he did, calling back to kind of his own philosophies, right, is he cast Tommy Chong. And there probably the cannabis theme was even stronger in this film than any of the previous films. Mm-hmm. But they had this great line where Tommy says, "Stoners don't fight, man," which reminds me of a Doug Benson bit, which is that no fist fight has ever broken out at a weed dispensary.
Right.
Like, bars have lots of fights, but at dispensaries, I guess everybody just forgets to punch each other.
Yeah.
When it comes to cinematography, I had a question. I'm pretty sure all the scenes in the Prius where Fred Armisen is driving them were green screened.
Yes, there's a little clip at the end, and you can see the green screen behind him.
Okay, so I had a pretty good eye then. Good for me.
Good job.
Mm-hmm.
Do you wish your Prius came with a toaster oven like Fred's?
I think that's better, at least for me, if my vehicle had a toaster oven in the glove box. Then there were some cars for a while that had a little refrigerator so you could put a bottle of wine there. I think that's somewhat problematic that you're making easy to carry alcohol in a motor vehicle.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say bottle of water.
No, it was specifically wine shaped. It was a little wine, because you're supposed to keep wine not at like 35 or whatever, but like 55 degrees or something. Right. I know all the enophiles are going to write in angry about my facts there, but I think a toaster oven is better.
Was there any head trauma in this film?
Oh, yes, there was. I had it recorded at 9:20, 30:05, and 45:57 separate dope slaps, and then a hockey stick to the head at 31:45.
Oof.
Which could actually cause serious damage. I don't recommend this at home, kids. Don't hit people with hockey sticks.
But it was Harley hit the bad guy, right?
Who did Harley hit? I'm not sure.
She hit the KGB person or the...
Probably, again, maybe should not hit people in the head with hockey sticks.
Unless it's a bad guy.
I guess, okay, it's a bad guy. But speaking of which, that reminds me a little bit of Home Alone.
Yeah.
But did you find out, was this in fact the John Hughes house? Did they film in that house that he used in Chicago or
I did not look it up, but when you said it, I feel very strongly. So I will answer that question in the show notes.
Okay. Is it the same van that they used in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back? Do you know?
I don't know, but I definitely noted that there were 4 women traveling in a van, much like Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back.
It's like a remake.
Yeah. I bet it's a new van. I don't know if he has warehouses where I know he keeps a lot of memorabilia, but I think only what he can put in a house, not in a warehouse.
But it could be like with the Roadkill guys where he sold it and then he bought it back from the guy he sold it to who kept it in pristine condition.
Or the fan let him use it because...
Right, so just so he could have a meet and greet with Kevin.
Exactly.
If Kevin needed a kickstart, he could sell like the, Smoke Weed with Kevin Smith would be. And that would be for like $420.
Yeah, he could back all kinds of movies.
Right.
All right, how about a smoochie?
Smoochie.
Do we get a smoochie? Or since this was a father-daughter, do we not?
I don't have a recorded smoochie.
Yeah, I don't think... there really wasn't a romantic kind of... This actually, a little ahead of our By the Numbers, it's listed as an action-adventure comedy.
Yeah, I think it's more a comedy. I didn't detect a romantic element to that.
Right. No, there really was. I mean, there was... Oh, yeah, no, because she had a wife. I was going to say there was Justice... Mm-hmm. And Jay, but they weren't getting back together because she had somebody.
Right.
Okay. All right. How about a driving review?
Well, we did mention the navy blue Prius driven by Fred Armisen. Can't really recommend that for a whole lot of much anything. Decent gas mileage. He did a good job, though, for the most part as a driver, but I don't know that I support handing around hot trays while driving a motor vehicle.
Could be problematic.
And I noticed that I'm pretty sure it was the Shannon Elizabeth character and Rosario Dawson left in a black Range Rover hate tank, as Kevin calls them, just the giant SUV. And then there's the 83 Ford Econoline van, where we're not exactly sure if it was the same or not. So there were some stunt driving at the KKK rally. I thought it was interesting, the line, "Oh, the Klan, they ruin everything." Well, in this case, somebody got to do some pretty cool brodies, which is what some people call donuts, coincidentally, similar to a character in the View-esque universe. And I'm assuming it was not actual human feces that was sprayed across people, but there was some of that going on there.
But some prop guys got to not only mix up fake poo,
Mm-hmm.
but got to figure out how they were going to projectile it onto the KKK.
Right. So in my mind's eye, I see them out in a parking lot the day before practicing, on each other, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Does it get the proper spray? Enough distance? Is it too misty? Yeah, I think there was probably a lot of work that went into that.
Yeah. All right. Should we go to the numbers?
Let's go to the numbers.
All right. The budget for this film is $10 million, which is quite a bit. And it's probably all the locations, which was New Orleans, New Jersey, Leonardo, where the Quick Stop was, and maybe the cast.
Yeah, it's a
but
good
I would
question.
think some of those casts. There were a lot of different setups. I mean, there was a lot of sets, different places. Maybe it was to pay for that Home Alone house.
And that van.
So unfortunately, it did not make very much. Domestically, it made about half, 4.5 million. Worldwide, it made 101,000. I don't know if maybe over the length of it, maybe Lionsgate was able to recoup that with DVD and Blu-ray sales, but Saban Films, who backed the theatrical release, and I remember we saw this in the theater, and it was we bought the tickets ahead of time. We saw it in a Regal theater, but it wasn't like your traditional go to the box office, buy your tickets, walk in and see the movie. They were pre-order only, I think. Maybe you could show up that day, but it was like an event. I think there were 2 showings.
Right. You got a free poster.
Right. I think you still have it around here somewhere. So that could kind of explain if it was just this literally like 2-night event only. So I guess to make 4.5 million, that says something right there, that all of your fans showed up in the form of 4.5 million for 2 nights.
I want to say there was also BTS that was going, that when you showed up, that Kevin and Jay did something before or after.
Yes. And I do believe that they did a handful, like 10 to 15, where they went to different cities and they would show it. So the one we saw, they weren't present. But yeah, there was like an hour either preceding it or after it where you could see like a making of.
The one where we went to, there was a really talented director wearing a movie shirt.
Yes, there was an award-winning director.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was kind of exciting. All right, so this rounds out our Kevin Smith month. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you got to maybe learn about Kevin Smith a little bit more. He's a fabulous filmmaker, an indie filmmaker, like Mike said on our first episode, which is why we picked him. He's extremely inspirational to me because he pretty much lives by the philosophy of just go do it, which is what we try to do. We try to write films. We try to figure out how we can make films. Say what you will about maybe some of his films, but in that sense, he is a champion of the filmmaker, and so are we. So thank you, Kevin Smith, for everything you did that these 2 knuckleheads here in Portland, Oregon can fulfill their dreams to and make movies. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Join us next month where we'll be talking about college films, still yet to be decided, and so we welcome any feedback. And if you think of any movies you want to suggest, shoot us an email at christy@dodgemediaproductions.com. And never forget,
Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.
Thanks for listening to Dodge Movie Podcast with Christy and Mike Dodge of Dodge Media Productions. To find out more about this podcast and what we do, go to dodgemediaproductions.com. Subscribe, share, leave a comment, and tell us what we should watch next. Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.